Australians, oh, let's make a choice, for we're no longer free. Our government has let us down and failed our own country. The great Australian dream is for the lucky few, but Aussies know what it really means to be true blue. Lest we forget what's a fair go and make Australia fair. South, we just want to live and grow. Advance Australia fair.
Woohoo! Howdy, folks. How are you doing? Bloody hot. Well, has been all day here. Bloody hot. Hoping you are not melting in the same fashion that I am, and your room is a little bit more cooler than mine. I've only got one light on tonight, so if I'm looking a bit shiny in places, I'm afraid we're all going to have to live with it. How are you, folks? Deborah was first in the house tonight. Good on you, Deb. Well done. Margot shortly, and must have been, oh no, there you go, 35 minutes later. So Margot was right in on 6. But Deborah, you must have been watching for when we got set up. DM was into pretty early. Hello, Veronique. Petty Grace, nice to have you. Pinaroo would have been a bit warmer than where I am today, no doubt. J1, good to have you in. Rabbitoh, that's an interesting question, Rabbitoh. What's your stance on John Whistle's motion? Then we have a better understanding of what they're trying to achieve by cutting off money to the councils and the governments. I sit exactly where Ricardo sits on this, I think. I think it's a great idea if everybody gets behind it. And I mean everybody gets behind it. This is not something that would, not an idea I think that will be successful if 10,000 people do it or 100,000 people do it. It has to be successful. There needs to be millions of people doing this. Now, while I understand there will be a lot of intent and great desire to do this, and I've signed the petition, the fact of the matter is I don't contribute a great deal to the government now as it is. So it's no hardship for me. I have nothing for them to take. But you might. If you haven't paid out your bank housing mortgage, if you haven't paid out your car loan, if you owe them somewhere, something, somehow, whether it be rates on the land or, for services they provide, whatever, they will come for you. Now, Darren Bergwerf is going through this process right now, and he, amongst many others. Now, I don't know, each to their own in this particular regard, but that is a years-long process, years-long of courts, battles, fighting, repartee, and you may or may not win. I agree that if we have millions of people who can do this, then great. But it's not millions of people who can do it for one day, because it's going to make absolutely no difference doing it for one day. Even if we have millions of people who do it all for a week, it'll have absolutely no effect. None. If we have 10 million people do it for 3 months, be pretty effective. But a number of the 10 million people being affected will have jobs in the industry designed to get your property back off you, sheriffs and the like, debt collectors and the like. Now, unless they're buying into this and refusing to go to work as well and enforce what their bosses are telling them to enforce, then you're going to get people knocking on your door, showing you paperwork and telling you to pack your bags. If 10 million people fight back, and those people responsible for doing that kind of work, the police, the sheriffs, the debt collectors, may even get down to the army one day, refuse to do the deep state's bidding and throw you out of your house for a debt that they potentially can't prove that you owe, well, you see where that's going. But it has to be millions and millions and millions of people. Now, I know how much John pays to keep his boat where it's parked on the Brisbane River. Well, we've spoken, we've been open and honest with each other about many, many, many things. I wonder whether or not the people that he has to pay his rent to every week are going to let him stay tied up there for the duration. And if they're not, who's going to protect him from being thrown off the finger? Because I'm not completely sure. It's been a while since I've been invited back to the boat. But last time I was on the boat, needed a lot of work. And I mean a lot of work. There are people in here who've been on the boat who are boat builders in the chat, who've been on the boat, had a look, got an idea, seen photos, had a look much closer, much deeper. There is work that needs to be done. Now, whether or not John has had that work done, I know there was a problem with one of the engines, all sorts of things. So he's not really in a position to get out in the river unless all that's been fixed. And it may have been. It may have been. Good luck to him if that is the case. But even if he is, then he's in the luxurious position of owning his own boat and being able to park in the middle of the river or, somewhere, a free anchorage somewhere. But you, if you're doing this, you're in your house. You're not paying any bills. So presumably, unless you're pissing it up against a wall, you're flush with money. Tax bills, electricity bills, phone bills. Of course, they will turn your phone off. They will turn your internet off. So right about that time, I reckon if we had 10 million people all doing this, probably 9.7 million of them are going to go back to work. They're going to pay their bill because they'll be cut off from the internet. Can't have that. Can't have not being able to touch my phone. Having it dead, my God. So while I agree in principle that the strike action itself will do something, it will be about as effectual as the petrol strikes that were organised some years ago when petrol was sky high and, you'd cop an email that says, righto, today nobody's buying petrol from any BP or any, I don't think Ampol were around then, Caltex probably, Mobil, anything like that. And it used to swap from day to day. So any servos, and then it would be one day, don't buy petrol at all from any servo today. Okay, so nobody bought petrol that day. They went in tomorrow and bought it. And then the petrol companies got smart and they put the price down on the day when nobody was meant to go and buy petrol. And what they do? Filled the forecourt with people buying petrol. People are lazy. People are greedy. People think of themselves first. Oh, look, it's only me doing it. If the rest of the world does it today, it won't matter. It's only me doing it. And then you find your next door neighbor pulled up beside you doing it. A friend pulled up, 2 rows down doing it. Oh, look, it's only the three of us. It's only the three of us. It's all right. Don't worry. We'll have a bit of a giggle about it later. Let's sneak out. Nobody will see us. And as you drive out, 6 more friends pull in behind and do exactly the same thing because it's the cheapest petrol they've seen in days, weeks, or months. Petrol companies know that. So what are you going to do not paying your bill for a day or a week? It's got to get to the point where the people who you're meant to pay the bill to send the debt collectors after you. This will affect your credit rating. How many of you are prepared to risk the credit rating, even though it is a corrupt instrument developed by the central banking system to control you? But it is very well in place and very good at controlling. Maybe not you, but certainly your access to things. And it's very much in place in Australia now. They don't call it the social credit score, just the credit score. But now you can find out whether or not you're a worthy citizen or an unworthy citizen based on the fact of whether or not you will pay your bills using an app. I mean, you can find out if you're a worthy or unworthy citizen using an app. So when the bank sends you all the paperwork, eventually you're going to have to go to court and defend your action so that the court doesn't issue a judgment against you. They've got to give one for you or against you. You've got to go in and fight that action. And if it becomes clear the court is never going to find for you, then you have to find a way that they can't find against you. And that's what Darren and others are doing as they fight their way through the court. It is a long process, which, unless you have a lot of money to back you and are prepared to go, and I would never suggest this, to go to a real lawyer and get them to help, then you have to do this work. And it's what we all have to do. If you want to be treated fairly in the court, you need to know what your freedom really means. I'm having this conversation with somebody on Facebook at the moment who seems to think they have an idea of what freedom is. Unfortunately, they have no concept of it, but they're very happy in their life and think that people like you and I, who believe we know what freedom is, and we certainly know what control is, lunatics. We should just be happy with our lot. So it's sad, but that mentality exists. It's not surprising because it's what we've had drilled into us. It's the brainwashing we've had drilled into us. So from university, from preschool through primary school to high school and university, if you made it all the way through university, better still, if you made it through university 3 or 4 times, in fact, you became a professional student, you've got degrees and masters and bachelors up your wazoo, but no practical knowledge or experience. But you are so full of the brainwashing that the university will probably employ you to brainwash others either as a tutor or as a professor. All that has to change, folks. It starts with who you elect in your local government. And I know I've been promising all week to get to some local government goodness, but it's been an interesting week. Things have played out in an interesting way. Unexpected outbursts, concerning outbursts, threatening outbursts. I don't know what's more concerning. You know, the threat of death and destruction and mayhem, or the public meltdown. I don't want to think of the mental stresses that Ricardo might be under. I have no idea of where he's been in his life prior, and other than a few things with public knowledge that I have access to. Much of his military career is, well, not hidden exactly, but uneventful would be what I'd call it. I don't know what he's seen and what he's done. I do know from personal experience, my biological father was a Vietnam veteran and suffered PTSD. He had flashbacks. These plagued him all his life. He got help later in life, and it eased that suffering a great deal. In fact, it made him a functioning human being again who stopped tying nooses while he was talking to you with a bit of rope in his hand, absently tying nooses. And we got to keep him around for another, what I suspect was 20 years or more, which was great. But they do have their days, their breakdowns. There's a reason the Vietnam vets like to go and live in places out in the middle of nowhere. It's because they don't like the way society has gone, certainly don't like the way society treated them when they got home. And yes, there may have been apologies, there may have been marches of love and kisses since that time. But some of the horrors suffered, particularly by those who went to Vietnam via conscription. And I have a theory about that. My biological father was a conscript. He never wanted to go to war. And he wasn't the kind of person who would walk up to the army and say, enlist me. He was a conchi. He was a lover, not a fighter, you know. He wasn't that kind of person. But the army makes you that kind of person, because that's what you have to be in the army. And it changes people. When I was driving limousines, I was very lucky to do a lot of DVA work. I used to transport veterans to medical appointments, you know, sometimes only around the corner, other times a couple of 100 kilometers there and back after the appointment. And on a couple of occasions, 6 to 12 hour drives to get them home, and then another 6 to 12 hour drive to get me home. Well, when you're sitting there with someone and you've got a few stories to tell yourself, and you have the ability to build a bit of rapport with the person, they do open up and they do tell you stories. And I've been very lucky to have that experience with World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans, Iraq War veterans, the first Iraq War, and Afghan and Iraq veterans since, people who served in Malaya, Borneo, people who were in the Battle of Britain, people who were in the first 1,000 bomber raid over the city of Dresden in the Second World War. Marvelous stories, all of them. A lot of the Vietnam veterans that I took were connies, conscripts, NASHOs, as they're known, national conscripts. And the rest, obviously, presented to whatever particular service they wanted to be in, Army, Navy, Air Force. I noticed the difference in the appointments I was taking these people to. For the guys that turned up to join the Army, Navy, or the Air Force, they were going off to get, you know, prostate checked, or, you know, have their teeth cleaned, or get their hair done, or whatever, before heading off on their next cruise after retirement, you know, doing whatever. Some of them were a little bit messed up at times. Some of them were being taken to, you know, a separate ward, a separate wing, a separate place. But that was because, you know, they were having a different kind of flashback. The NASHOs, on the other hand, well, they had the same kind of similar doctor's appointments, but invariably, and by a much larger margin, I was taking them to psychiatric appointments. I was taking them to places where they stay and do 3-4 week courses to learn how to get back out into society again, to deal with the demons on the inside. Well, of course, that my biological father went through in Heidelberg. And it saved his life. I've been lucky enough to take the blokes who are on the edge wanting to take their life to that place, not in Heidelberg, but in Brisbane, and be lucky enough to pick them up and take them home again 4 weeks later. And the difference in them is simply amazing. Now, they're not perfectly fixed, but they now, after that 4 weeks, if they make that 4 weeks, they have the tools to get better, to help themselves get better, to play a better, stronger role in their families' lives. And PTSD can be a terrible thing. It can affect you in so many ways, and anger certainly is one of them. Unfortunately, I don't think I have PTSD to use as an excuse for my anger at times. I want to show you an email that I got today. I wasn't going to do this, but now that we're talking about it, I want to show you an email that I got today from a returned serviceman. I got a few emails today, but this one sort of sums it up. It says, greetings, Carl. Enjoyed your show last night, the 22nd, as I do for most of them. I, too, was appalled at Bosey's rant against Darren Bergworth. I have followed Bosey for some years now as a registered supporter and have noticed over that time some disturbing stuff coming out of his mouth. He comes across to me now as a bloke who is rapidly losing control of his senses. Like Bosey, I am a veteran, a Vietnam veteran, thank you for your service, who suffers from PTSD and has been placed on a pension because of it. Regardless of the severity of this disability, there is no excuse for the disgusting behaviour recently displayed by this bloke. He keeps referring to himself as a simple soldier. He's only half right. He's no longer a soldier. I am now of the opinion that Ricardo Bosi is no longer fit to remain in his position, and my support for him has been withdrawn. Why am I telling you this? Don't know. Just had to tell someone. Cheers, Pat. Pat wasn't alone in sending me emails like that today, a lot of them. And I'm not going to share them all, but Pat's sort of pretty much wrapped up the feelings of every one of those. I didn't get one in support of Ricardo, put it that way. And I got to tell you, that hurts me more than you know, for a variety of reasons, but I find that sad. Now, I can go into reasons why they're doing these sorts of things. I had a conversation with somebody the other day who rang me breathlessly telling me that Ricardo was talking about dumbs. Ricardo's talking about dumbs. And this must have been on one of the American things that he and Guru like getting their audience from, because it's quite clear they're not getting much of an audience here anymore. I asked this person, is he telling you anything new about dumbs? Is he telling you or showing you pictures? Is he talking to someone who's been down the hole and can prove it? No. I said, has he told you anything new that you've never heard before? No. I said, so why are you so excited to be hearing about it again? And I said, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Can I tell you why I believe, and it's only my opinion, my observation, can I tell you why I believe Guru is in a T-shirt wall with Dave Onegs and abusing anybody and everybody who runs past him? And why Ricardo is ranting and talking about dumbs and infiltrators and Freemasons, the same things he's been talking about since he got on the stage and started talking to us so many years ago. They know by looking at their show analytics what people watch and for how long. The analytics that we get behind the show apparently give us all this detail. Now, the only reason I know this, because I don't look at my analytics at all, they're numbers. Poker machine eyes, remember, doesn't work with me. But I do have a mate who works with Channel 9, interestingly enough, and he knows all about that. And we were talking about analytics one night. So now I know what to actually look for if I go looking. And he told me the secret of what to go looking for. It's what they do in TV land. Looking for spikes in programming. What viewers are watching, or how many viewers are watching what for longer periods of time. What attracted their audience in the first place? Well, it talks of dumbs certainly attracts audience. White hat talk, talk of infiltration of spies in the midst of, all sorts of, backroom deals and whatnot. Well, I can tell you, Ricardo is not a part of any backroom deal that's happening in Australia, because he won't come to the table. He doesn't trust anybody who's at it. So he's isolated himself completely from anybody who might be making a deal. I'm not saying there are. I'm just saying he's not come to the table. He's made it very clear. Very, very clear. So they're plucking the strings that keep you watching, keep them. Oh, he's talking about dumbs. Oh, that'd be horrible. Oh, we're talking about reptilians again. Oh, it's the Anunnaki. Oh, it's the Greys. Now, I get the feeling that hype is more coming from the American audience that they're speaking to, that American audience that can do nothing for us. It does a lot for them, personally, I guess, makes them feel good, but doesn't do anything here. And of course, new Americans, big audience, 330 million people over there, new people coming in every day to new talks with, the Patriot and others. Then they're going to get all excited about hearing stories about dumbs, about white hats, and about infiltrators. What other stuff do you see him talking about? Well, recently he's had Gideon on talking about blood analysis, which is great because the blood analysis work hasn't been done by Gideon. It's been done by former Dr. David Nixon, who you've seen on my show, and I've got an opener with some of his stuff he did on the nanotechnology coming out of the jet. Now, David and I love David to bits. He's such a nice man. In fact, I can reach out and grab a beanie that he left here. He is such a lovely man. However, I discovered after our last meeting, while we were standing out in the driveway saying our goodbyes, that he was, at that time at any rate, the executive, one of the executives on the TAP board, which really deflated me because I really liked David and I loved what we could have done together with his microscopes. But I said, I'm sorry, I can't work with you if you're with TAP. And I explained why. I didn't have a go at him. David was unaware at the time. He said that, they had such close ties to the UN. And sadly, he backed out of my driveway, and that's the last we've spoken. When I saw Gideon appearing on Ricardo's show, quoting David Nixon, I shot a text off to Guru quickly, just said, you do know that David Nixon is, on the executive of the TAP board. Is it okay now to, deal with TAP stuff? ? It took a day to get a reply, but apparently he's not with TAP anymore, he said. So I don't know. I've sent a message to David and he hasn't replied to it yet. So maybe I was very strong about my dislike for TAP when he was parked in my driveway, so much so that he didn't want to talk to me again. It is possible. People get vibes off me. It's passion. It's not anger, folks. It's just passion. I spent too many years being dishonorable. Well, not an honorable human, not dishonorable, but just not an honorable person. These days, I understand and accept it in people, but I don't accept it in myself. And it's hard to understand and accept it in other people after you've sort of given them the warning about honor and how strongly I feel about it. And I'm not completely sure that there is much honor in what's going on in the background. I'm not saying he's being dishonorable. I'm just saying there is something wrong with Ricardo Bosi. He can't maintain this pace. He can't maintain this ranting pace, destroying his own supporter base, destroying his own executive. In that video, he said he was in Victoria, in a Victorian meeting, exec meeting, fixing messes. He'd never had to go in and fix messes there before because Craig Cole was there for him. But Craig's gone. Craig's now focusing on saving the children because that's what he feels very strongly about. And God love him. We'll get him on the program. I've got a great video piece of certainly a portion of a chat that he had with Craig Kelly, put him on the spot. And I want to help Craig plug his website, get as much information out to the people as possible. But previously, I wasn't allowed to talk to Craig, or Craig wasn't allowed to talk to me. Why? Well, nobody still knows. Nobody, including me. Another rant, another carry-on, another decision that nobody gets explained because nobody gets access to ask the question to get the explanation. Unless you're part of the anointed group, clearly. And I suspect anybody who goes and asks a question, off the prescribed asking question answer list doesn't stay in the, the circle of trust for very long. I suspect. Don't know. I suspect. As soon as any decisions are questioned, is my understanding, there is a great deal of pushback. Some pushback has been felt very strongly. Just ask the former members of A1 South Australia who had their A1 South Australia platform dissolved around them. How do you build your party that isn't a party when all you do is abuse them, tell them that nobody can be trusted except you and your tight-knit organization, which Ricardo admitted had a Freemason in it. And that Freemason went and talked to Darren Bergworth. So a few questions. But I suppose the most obvious one is, how did you know that you had a Freemason in your very tight Victorian executive meeting? Second one would be, how long have you known that that person was a Freemason? And third person is, how do you know that that person spoke to Bergworth? All of these things, I presume you would have proof of. I'd really like to see the proof. You don't have to talk to me, Ricardo, but you do have my email address. Maybe you've lost it. carl@vofhq.com. I'm sure there's a few people in the chat that will email you and provide it if you've forgotten it. But please send me the proof. Please come on and show the proof if you don't want me to have it in my hand. But otherwise, please use your DVA access and go and get some help. Because despite what many people may think, there are a great many people out here who still care and love you very, very much, who still care about you, who love you. They're just losing respect for you, hand over fist. And while you're losing them hand over fist, you're abusing the shit out of them as they leave. You are doing a John McEnroe circa 1984. And it's genuinely sad to watch. Genuinely. You raised the hope of so many people in this country. You gained the interest of so many more, who then started to support you. You had the potential to do great things. And by your own word, your own anger, your own paranoia, or your own PTSD, we have a front row seat to you tearing it all down. And it's sad to watch. Very sad to watch. Can it be arrested? I don't know. Judging by what Pat says, and many others, I would say you don't have a hope in hell of getting people to follow you up a hill, let alone let you lead a country. If what you are seeking is leadership by appointment rather than election, and by that I mean the white hats come in and appoint you in some role for X amount of period of time, based on your performance in the last week, nay, the last month, the people of Australia will revolt against you. And those that you used to count amongst supporters will be amongst them revolting. That's sad. I've made excuses. I've never told people. I've never talked about what happened after our little trip around the Victoria, Canberra, Sydney thing, because it's not anybody else's business. And to be honest, I still don't know what the hell happened, because you don't communicate. Yeah, we had one phone call, but that wasn't communicating. That was just making a statement. And the end of that statement, there was an undertaking to come on my show early in January of the following year. It was December we spoke. I think there were 8 requests I sent for that. Never got a reply from you or Rio or anybody else on the executive that you trust. I've got text messages and screenshots and all sorts of interesting things from around that period with a lot of people that were involved with it all. I've never shared those with anybody. There's no need to. As it turns out, you're tearing yourself down. And it's sad. And I'm concerned for you, genuinely concerned. But I'm also like John Wilson. I'm not a fucking stretcher bearer. So pick yourself up, change tack, become a human, try and rebuild, or provide the proof of what you say. Yes? I look forward to hearing from you. I know I won't. Chris Minns, that's a piece of work, don't you think, folks? An absolute shocking piece of work. Chris Minns has today, I'm reliably informed, I didn't load up the little slide, has defunded kids' palliative care for 2 years, has cut the funds in half for terminally ill children. Why on earth do you think they would do that? Some might suggest at the rate our children are dying, they have no need for palliative care. They die very quickly. Heart attack, stroke, all sorts of shit. And the cancers, the turbo cancers that our kids are getting, are killing them within weeks. So the palliative care wards, not going to need too many new toys. Absolutely friggin' disgusting. And you know what? Somebody watching this voted for that prick. Somebody here voted for the person who thinks that's a good idea to halve palliative care funding for 2 years. He's got a team of people around him who think that that's a good idea. That'll be the unelected bureaucrats. But he'll be asking his fellow elected members what they think about it. And, well, here it is. So we know what they think about it, don't we? They think it's okay. No worries. What are you going to do with all that money you're saving? Another brown paper bag for the people, I'm guessing. Another very large brown paper bag for the people, I'm guessing. Sadly, I guess it is what it is. We're not going to have... Well, I think one day we will have justice. I think we will have justice. Speaking of justice, we might be getting towards a bit of that justice in, well, the not too distant future, I hope, as we head towards the inquiry into the inquiry of possibly having an inquiry about the spicy cough. There have been many submissions put forward to that inquiry. Senator Roberts is very active in that inquiry, and we thank him for the efforts that he, Senator Antic, Senator Rennick, and others are putting into it. But I particularly want to point out Julian Gillespie and the submission that he put in. And I have a piece here that I'm going to play. It's only about a minute long, but I think it encompasses what is one of the greatest consequences of the actions taken by those who govern over us in the last few years. Have a look at this.
Trust has been lost in so many quarters. There's not only the doctor-patient relationship where now mum and the family can't trust the GP that they were attending for the last 20 years because the government has inserted themselves in between that relationship. Now we have doctors committing suicide. That affects communities. When a doctor in their community commits suicide, the community loses trust in the support facilities, professional support agencies for those doctors. That a new experimental drug, hot off 6 months of clinical trials, was safe and effective. It was the biggest marketing coup by Big Pharma in Big Pharma's history. Every person here is fielding calls every second day from vaccine injured or families of deceased from these vaccines. They're not vaccines, they never were vaccines. They're gene therapies. The country was not informed.
Not a truer word said. The country definitely was not informed. Well, unless you watch The Voice of Freedom from my first show. I was telling you. I'm not doing an I told you so. I always said that. I would never do that. I'd like to show you some other madness that's going on in the world. Here's just something you might take notice of. The American Red Cross is now asking for blood donors if they've received the spicy jab injection. If donors answer yes, they're advised to call ahead to confirm if they're still eligible to donate. Why would that be? Because there's a fragment of HIV in every jab. If you are going into hospital and you think you might need a blood transfusion, for God's sake, get your own blood taken out of you and stored. Get that used. Do not take anything they're handing out from the fridge, because God knows what's in it. God knows what's in it. Speaking of God knows what's in it, there's a row as hospitals say the hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for baby as the real thing. There are people who believe that, folks. They walk among us and they'll honestly believe that's real. Of course, it's a human body. Milk come from the human body. Yeah, great. Daddy's milk's nothing different to mummy's milk. Not at all. I mean, not from me. I've got a good size C. I probably don't need too many hormones other than to create lactation. Milk sacs, glands, whatever it is. Am I going to grow milk glands? Am I going to be able to grow the anatomy of a breast through the hormones they give me? Where's the fetus going to gestate? In a box? Well, it's not quite that bad. Where's the nipple going to lactate? This is idiocy. And yet, people play along with it. People don't push back, like you. People don't point it out. They don't say, are you serious? If a doctor said that to me, I'd probably have to walk up and slap him in the face to make sure they were awake still. Not sleepwalking and sleep talking bullshit. Because to me, every alarm bell in my head goes off. But there are so many people who just say, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all good. Nothing weird about that. Sure. If we're going to let them change their sex and pretend they're a female, we may as well pretend that their milk tastes all right too, I guess. And further, we may as well pretend that it's not going to hurt the baby. Probably won't get time to, because as soon as the baby has been hatched, it's going to get an mRNA injection. Then it's anybody's guess. Unbelievable. What else have I got in here to show you tonight? Oh, there's a lot of interesting things. You might remember about 14 years ago, the Australian taxpayer forked out $300 million to give Yulara Resort to our First Nations people out that way. Well, now they want to sell the struggling Ayers Rock Resort. I thought it was called Yulara. But at any rate, they want to sell it with the money they bought with the $300 million we gave them. It gets better. So the resort, which has got the only accommodation for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles around, used to be a real hub for tourism, right? They're still trying to tell you 250,000 people a year go there. I can tell you that's bullshit. But anyway, they decided we would give this $300 million taxpayer-funded resort to the Aboriginal-run company Voyages, which just happens to be a subsidiary of the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, the ILSC, which also happens to be a Commonwealth government body. Now, we're missing a space in that sentence there. Commonwealth government body. Because it is the Commonwealth that was used to pay for it, wasn't it? So, the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation's primary objective is to fulfill a statutory obligation of returning the land to First Nations people, and in doing so create Indigenous benefit for traditional owners and local, regional and national First Nations people. Now, with that objective in mind, the assessment is focused on exploring potential alternative ownership options for the Ayers Rock Resort. Now, it was controversially acquired using taxpayer money. Then it was written down a couple of years or a year or so later to $225 million in value. The Aboriginal corporation running it raising concerns about the original sale price that they never paid. We did. So, of course, the resort, I've only been there once, and that was in like 1991, and I was only allowed to walk in and have a beer and walk out. We got to go and sleep in a tent somewhere out where dingoes live. The thriving resort, they say, gets 250,000 visitors annually now. Bullshit. Well, right now, 5 hotels, a campground, swimming facilities, top-notch restaurants, and an airstrip, all not getting used very much. But probably the big part of this gets down to when addressing the sale of an asset that was given to them by the taxpayer with the express purpose of creating opportunities for local Aboriginals, the Land and Sea Council Group Chief Executive said, "We are committed to getting this right and achieving a positive outcome with Indigenous benefit front of mind." I wonder just whose benefit in the Indigenous family is front of mind. What happens to the $225 million if they were to get that? Because that's what they wrote it down to. Let's say they were to get that. Bugger it, let's call it. Let's say they get $100 million. So it's a net $200 million loss to the taxpayer. Will that money be coming back to the taxpayer at all, or will that? Where does that go? Well, hang on. Let's see if we can read on. Now, the government's original intentions for the purchase was to enhance economic prospects for the local Aboriginal communities and, the area around it. However, that target has never been reached. They were trying to achieve a 50% Aboriginal employment target at the resort. It has never been reached. Additionally, part of the deal was the establishment of the Indigenous Tourism Training Academy at Yulara, which has not been fully implemented and faced persistent postponements. This place has been an failure by the sounds of it from the day it was handed over. Wesley Aird, a one-time Indigenous advisor to John Howard, wrote a piece for The Australian in 2009 where he claimed there was a culture of fabrication within the Indigenous affairs of Australia, targeting mainstream Australians. It thrives because of mainstream Australia's inability to spot a cultural fraud, even when it's staring it in the face. It's often shrouded by the mystical and unchallenged by the naive because of fear of giving offence. It's handsomely rewarded with grants by unwitting government officials, and the false culture is abetted by a broad willingness to be hoodwinked. Never truer words spoken, I don't think. What a shit fight. How many people grew up wanting to go to Ayers Rock, wanting to climb Ayers Rock? Now, okay, I can probably understand the climbing part. Certainly never was high on my list of things I needed to do. But I wanted to go up to it. I wanted to touch it. I would have climbed up a bit of it, had no interest of going all the way, but I would have gone up some of it for sure. And certainly I wouldn't have pissed on it. I don't think I would have smashed anything on it. I wouldn't have left anything on it. But I understand there are morons who do and may have spoiled it for others. I do remember getting to drive around it, and if I was going to fight my way over to the line to climb it, I would have had to fight my way through a car park of wrecked cars, burnt out vehicles, and sleeping bags, camps around the rock, which wasn't terribly attractive at all. But I can only imagine that has been cleaned up now, because everybody who was living there is now probably living over at Yulara and looking for a job. Oh, well, no, wait. That didn't work out that way, did it? Now you can't drive there. So school holidays. Hey, kids, let's go to Ayers Rock. Well, let's go to Uluru, because we'll say that right. There are people from the land there that don't want it called Uluru. Do you know that? Aboriginal people, black people who come from that part of the world don't want it called Uluru. They're happy with Ayers Rock. There's a whole story about that too. But I know, you're going to pack your kids up. Let's just say, for instance, let's do the journey here to Ayers Rock. I don't know where your here is, but my here to Ayers Rock is conservatively 3,000 kilometres, probably 4. Yours is probably the same or more. I don't know how old your kids are, but let's call it 4,000 kilometres, pulling a van 8 hours a day. It's going to take you 3 or 4 days to get there. When you get there, you're not going to be allowed to go near the rock. You'll be able to stand somewhere in a thistle-infested bit of desert holding a $6 can of Coke and a $14 packet of Twisties, looking at the sun go down this rock on the distance. But that'll be about as close to it as you're allowed to get, I think, these days. And then you go over to Yulara, where you can, if you choose to get out of the caravan for the night, pay $1,000 a night to sleep in a 5-star bed, or pay $999 a night to sleep in a tent that you provide. I might be exaggerating on the prices, but they're very expensive. All right, you're prepared to tank up. You're prepared to take the risk that your fuel's not going to get messed with when you go and buy it anywhere along the road out there. Or you've got enough space to take your own. Okay, cool. You've got enough money to put everybody in a helicopter and take them for a flight over the Olgas. Unbelievable. That's great. And then you all pile back in the car and you head back home. Now, you'll come to a T intersection after you leave Uluru. There'll be a service station on your left-hand side, and it'll take you 2.5 hours to get to Alice Springs from there. If you're doing the speed, well, normal speed. If you turn right, you're about 5 or 6 hours, I think, from Coober Pedy. Nice trip on the way home. Call into Coober Pedy. Say hi to my friends down there. And stay a couple of days, go into an underground, see what it's all about, learn about opal mining, maybe grab yourself something to help you pay for the trip, and then piss off home. How are the kids going to like that? 8 days in the car. How are you going to enjoy that? 8 days in the car. I guess everybody's got an iPad these days and a set of headphones, so might be all right. But it's a long way to go not to do very much. Can't really do anything in the sand except get out of it when it's hot because it burns. So 300 million bucks we paid to give that to the people who want to sell it. And it is at this point, at least, unclear where that money would go. I'm pretty confident it's not coming back to us. Don't you love good old Rabbi Yosef? This is his thoughts on the Goyim. That's us, in case you weren't sure. The sole purpose of non-Jews is to serve Jews. They will work, they will plow, they will reap. We will sit like an effendi and eat. That is why Gentiles were created. He passed away. He might be one of those guys that they were trying to bring back in the tunnels underneath the synagogue in New York. I think I might have played a little clip to you, or maybe I didn't play it because it was just a bit long, and I've removed it from here if I did play it, where a Jewish gentleman was explaining what the blood stains on a mattress that was seen being hauled out by young men from under the synagogue, out of the tunnels of the synagogue in New York. And he was explaining that they do ceremonies to try and bring back the dead. People were wondering whether or not it was blood, and they were talking. Generally, the conversation felt like it was about adults they were trying to bring back to life, but nobody in that conversation seemed to raise the point that that was a child's mattress that they were holding, a child's mattress, not an adult one. So yeah, there you go. Hey, some interesting things going on in the world. Look at that. Freedom Financial Solutions has a new logo. It's a bit flash, very flash. And we've got a big one that goes all the way over my face. It works so well. But anyway, tonight, Cass and the team from Ainsley Bullion, and let me just show you what Ainsley are doing at the moment. They're in Shepparton tonight, doing a talk there on the wonders of gold and silver, or other precious metals too. And Cass is talking about self-managed super funds. So last night in Wagga, thanks to everybody who turned up there, and hi, and everybody in Shepparton tonight. I know you're in the middle of the show right now, so the pub in Shepparton will be going off, so to speak. So looking forward to hearing more about tonight's events tomorrow. And Monday, look out Melbourne. Cass is coming to town, and so too are the Ainsley crew. A bit further for Cass to travel than them, but they'll be at Rowville on Monday, the My Place meeting at Rowville Monday. You can go to myplaceaustralia.org or go into the Unity Hub and find out more details on that. And on Tuesday night, why don't you go down and give Darren Bergworth a hug? Because Cass will be. She'll be there with the Ainsley crew at My Place in Frankston. And it will be I'm pretty confident, the final week of Darren for Dunkley's campaign. The election will be taking place, I think, the following Saturday. So if you want to go down and express a bit of support for Darren, he'd love to see you. And if you want to learn a bit about self-managed super funds and precious metals, Cass from Freedom FFS and the team from Ainsley Bullion, Katrina, I think, will be there. David will be there. I'm not sure if Michael will still be down there or not. Actually, no, he won't. I know that because I'm going to meet with him in Brisbane on Tuesday. So, yeah, all good in a beautiful world. You'll be able to catch everybody else, though, at Frankston, My Place, on Tuesday night. And like I say, pop down, see Darren, and well, tell him your thoughts. I mean, I know that he's been getting a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, particularly from veterans, and that seems to be, the thing with me, who are most upset about the threat, that Ricardo's put out. So yeah, look, Darren's been under a bit of pressure. He's got a bit going on in his world at the moment. This is probably the last thing he needs, and maybe that's just what they want to do. But Darren Bergworth is a very strong, tough man, folks. Hard to keep a good man down, and I don't think Darren Bergworth's anywhere close to going down yet. So going to be a bit of fun. All right. It's just about done on the hour, and I have promised my daughter, who is cooking dinner, that I would do a 1 hour show. I want to go through your comments tonight, but bugger it, I can't. I'm sorry, because I've talked too long. I will, however, keep this open for a while, and I'll come back after I've eaten dinner and read your comments. So I am interested to hear what your thoughts are, and if you've got something that I've missed and you particularly want me to know about, then please email me, carl@vofhq.com. I do want you, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent criticism. I'm not going to take troll criticism. I'm not going to show that, but if you have got a genuine criticism of me, I'm very happy to show that. I'm not soft, but I'm not going to entertain trolls, and we'll leave it at that. Hey, have yourself a bloody great weekend, folks. If you are heading out and about, there really is only one thing aside from the Voice of Freedom that you should be watching. No, there's two things you should be watching. You should be checking out the Cairns News website, cairnsnews.org, because they've got some pretty good bloody headlines there coming up, and some very, very interesting stories. And of course, you've got to watch those dickheads on the road.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!